So imagine, if you would, a situation that probably all of us have been in at some point or another if you're an adult listening to this show. Boy meets girl, girl meets boy, and you begin to talk and chat and be interested in each other. Yep, you're dating. And as the dating begins to go along, you begin to notice something doesn't seem quite right. Something's a little bit off, but you're not really sure, and you're interested anyway in this person, so you continue dating. But then as things progress, it gets weirder and a little bit more uncomfortable. And for whatever reason, because you're interested in this person, you find yourself staying put and dealing with some very serious issues in a relationship. And it might even be to the point of domestic violence. That's what we're going to be talking about this evening on Through a Therapist's Eyes. So I am Chris Gazdick, and Mr. Graves, man, 2 weeks in a row is down. He is sick, not feeling well. He was busy last week with some things. So for 2 weeks in a row, Mr. Robinson, we have you hanging out with us tonight again, Neil. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
All right. I'm a little bit tired and brain fried, but we're fighting through and doing the good fight. Mr. Graves is a coach, and I am a mental health and substance abuse therapist, where we invite you to see the world through the lens of a therapist on Through a Therapist's Eyes. I have a book actually available. Neil, it's available now. Did you know?
Yes, I do.
Pretty excited about that, guys, as you know from last week in the book promotion. Craig has a website that you could find him to talk with him about his coaching services, wininyourmind.com. So this is not the delivery of therapy services in any way. Check out our website, Through a Therapist's Eyes, where you got a lot of cool things that Mr. Neil, you have been taking on. How's that project coming along on the website with different facets that we've got now?
The next 2 weeks are going to be crazy for me to button these things up for the listening audience. So,
right, what do you mean by that?
Just getting we're going to start doing some blog posting with a couple categories, and we're going to get the rest of the books and stuff up there, and just clean it up, make it easy for you guys to come get information from us. There's so much great stuff you've put out there, Chris, that people just need to see it and listen to it.
Funny, I guess it's the holidays, man. You're supposed to be taking some time off. You're telling me you're going to ramp up? What's up with that?
It's called procrastination, Chris.
Yeah. All right. We have honesty on this show. So we also have a promotional experience with BetterHelp.com. If you go to the counseling tab, speaking of the things on the website, and you click the counseling tab, it sets you up with a survey where you get connected with a therapist through the teletherapy and video conferencing platforms that they have. Given the pandemic, it has absolutely taught me that I am sold on the way that stuff works. I used to not want to promote anything like that for just teletherapy, but dude, I am surprised and happy and pleased to say that I've had some of my best therapy sessions with people actually just on the telephone. So this is the human emotional experience, and I propose, even without Mr. Craig Graves, that we figure this thing out together today. So yeah, you heard the intro a little bit there, man. We have a really cool topic that is different on a topic that we've covered before with, kind of domestic violence. But Neil, I was thinking, man, we're supposed to like build up with happiness and joy. And I think, like you said before the microphones come on, man, what are we doing to our audience? How did this all develop this way? What have we done recently? What's the recap?
I think we had trauma. Soldiers dealing with trauma. Then we had trauma again on which one was that one? That one's how to help your loved one who's gone through trauma.
Right.
And then we had one more about someone who went through abandonment and trauma and how she's come through. Yeah. And then of course the last one we did was about the drug addiction, which led to actually drug trafficking and his turnaround. So it's definitely not the best topics, but overall, the last two, very uplifting when you talk to the people who went through it. So it is kind of uplifting, even though the topics are a little more serious than we'd expect going into a holiday.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Yeah, actually, I'm glad you made that point, Neil, because you're right. The part of the thing that we really kind of highlighted, particularly with the drug trafficking thing, is the hopefulness that's actually gets created. Like when you deal with these things, and that's part of what our show and what I'm all about, just as a passionate mental health and substance abuse therapist. Like, we really can deal with these things and engage them and recover and heal and be well. And then when you do, dude, on the other side of that, you're stronger for it. And I like to say, you learn the most when you hurt the most. And fortunately, the hurting part sucks, but it's really a truism. And I think we have another example of that, honestly, tonight. And so we're going to get to Miss Kasie Morgan and what she has to share with us in her own personal experiences with that, kind of this topic. So a little bit of an announcement, though, to the audience. We are actually going to take some time off. I wasn't joking. I guess Neil's not, but we're going to take a couple of weeks, Christmas and New Year's, just kind of the way that we record, kind of hits on some not so good days for us. Let Craig definitely get all rested up. We're going to fire up again after this show. Oh, Neil, listen to this, man. We're going to fire up again in this show in 2021. Right?
Hopefully it's better than 2020.
2021. We will not do a show until this year, after this year is done. I told you guys we're gonna get through this year. It's been such a tough time, but we're this close to getting through all this nonsense. So hang with the world. It's gonna get better. Miss Kasie Morgan. She's actually, Neil, check this out, man. The reason why this show is happened is we were just actually talking in the hallway the other day. She is the newest member of Metrolina Psychotherapy Associates. Welcome to Through a Therapist's Eyes, Kasie, but more importantly, welcome to Metrolina.
Thank you. It's been a ride so far. I'm looking forward to many more adventures.
Absolutely. So this is actually just from her website. Now you got to add to this, Kasie, I guess, because I mean your credentials are awesome. And I don't mean to embarrass you, but I'm going to say something that is absolutely true. I think it's fair to say I really am more excited to have Kasie, Neil, having joined Metrolina more than any other person we've joined on before. I mean, I'm that, like, this girl she is a solid therapist, man, and it's going to be awesome to have her around Metrolina. And I mean that, Kasie. So really welcome here.
Well, that's a little bit of Christmas cheer right there.
There you go, right? She is a licensed clinical mental health counselor and qualified supervisor. She graduated from, oh God, that's a bad thing though. It's okay. UNC Chapel Hill with her
Our Hills?
Yeah, rehab counseling and psychology. She's been working in the field for 15 years as a licensed clinician. For 6, her theoretical orientation resides in treating the whole person and focusing on the functioning of the individual. She roots in cognitive behavioral therapy, which we all do, right? Anyway, she uses a myriad of approaches to counseling, increases resiliency and self-efficacy. She gladly welcomes all into her therapy space, with the majority of her experiences spanning all age groups, sexual orientations, gender identities, and couples. So, yeah, where do you come from, Miss Kasie, and what are you doing, and what have you been doing? Where do you come from clinically?
Yeah, so, oh, sorry, what were you saying, Chris?
As well as personally, whatever.
Oh, yeah. So I was actually kind of born and raised in this area. I'm from Denver, North Carolina, and I found my way back to Denver, North Carolina, which has been awesome, by way of an undergraduate degree in special education. So I'd actually taught school for a while. And then after teaching school and recognizing some social injustices there, I got really passionate about the mental health of children. And that's how I got introduced to rehab counseling and psych at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the best blue in North Carolina, as I like to say, that Carolina blue. I'm sorry if that just lost a few listeners for us, but
there is the West Virginia University blue and gold, or gold and blue, actually.
But really clinically, I just come from a place of knowing that, kind of like a manifest destiny type of place, right? Like, where you are now has a lot to do with where you came from, but where you want to go is where I really try to focus and practice. So yes, bad things happen all the time and bad things happen to good people, but it doesn't have to stop there. And so really focusing on the resiliency of the individual and coming up with a goal and really being motivated towards that goal of overall wellness and health, and how do we get there, and how do we experience post-traumatic growth really in those narrow places that we've been. So that's kind of theoretically where I approach therapy and counseling, and really any work that an individual does. And how does things like impact your functioning, and how do you want to function better, and how can we get there? And we get there together. And then that transition is just really where all of my approaches reside.
Cool. Yeah, it's interesting and funny, I think, because the therapy practices that we do, it really is true to say that there's a part science to it and there's a part art to it. And I think part of what I was so interested in working with you, Kasie, and part to promote you, you know, because we do have a lot of local listeners. Of course, if you're out of the state listening, she can't do therapy with you, but I really think that you're going to be where you have been and just have excellent therapy skills artistically, you know, as well as scientifically. So I think that I just want to give you that little bit of a plug. And like I said, I don't want to embarrass you and go too much with it, but I think you're really kind of lining up to help a whole lot of people over what I hope is a long career. So, Neil, the way this topic kind of came up, and let me set up what we're talking about, is interestingly enough, we were just kind of chatting, you know, I'm getting to know Kasie as she's joined us, and, you know, I was in the hallway and I have no idea how it came up. Kasie, do you remember even how we got into the topic?
Yeah, I was telling you about a podcast that I was listening to, I think, and I kind of related to it, and then we started talking about the subject and things
Gotcha. Yeah. So it was like, you know, just talking to Kasie, Neil, and I remember honestly feeling pretty surprised because she began to talk about a relationship that she was in early on in life, and kind of the way that it went down. And it was kind of like it's where I got the intro from, in beginning tonight. And it was just struck me. It was kind of like geez, in my own clinical brain, like, you know, how did that happen? Like, you know, I know you, that in the sense of, you know, however long I've known you, not well, but I know you. And it's like, that shouldn't be the case. Like, that doesn't happen to people I know, that, you know. But part of the whole theme of tonight's concept in my mind is no, like, you know, it does. Like, you know, relationships that get weird and destructive and sometimes even dangerous, you know, like, they do happen, and they happen like right in front of your freaking eyes, right in your own circles, you know, and you just don't always realize it. Does that sound crazy, Kasie, or what do you hear from that?
No, I mean, I think that's really true and really indicative of my experience. I mean, I was a spry 21-year-old person, you know, ready to take on the world, had just graduated from undergraduate school, was becoming a teacher. And I think that was the mindset I had. You know, I was in a really good place and good things were happening for me and around me. And so I think that I was not prepared for what was about to transpire in my world, just even emotionally, physically, but even maturationally at that age, thinking that things like this would just never happen to me or anybody that I knew, really.
Yeah. And here you are, you know, a young professional person, you know, up and ready to attack the world. I mean, I've got your personality a little bit down, I think, and it is not a passive one. It is, you know, let's go, you know, like Craig likes to say on the show, or to me all the time. He's like, you know, get after it. This is a girl that gets after it, Neil. She like goes after it. And I was like, okay, well, what happened? You know, so let's get to that case a little bit. You know, what really, how did that, you know, take us back a little bit? I mean, I guess it's been a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds really cliche sometimes when people talk about the perfect storm, but this is kind of what it was. Like, I was graduating from college simultaneously. My grandfather, who I revered, really had a lot of medical impairments. And so I watched systemically my mom and my aunts struggling to take care of him. And that was kind of when I was in my senior year of college. And so when I graduated in December of 2005, they were kind of at a weird place because my grandfather couldn't qualify at that time for like home health services. And my mom was running herself ragged trying to care for him. So at 21, I actually made the decision when I graduated that I was going to move in with him and assist him. So that plays into this story quite readily because I was really at a vulnerable place. I had just graduated. This was my first like real world experience, my first big girl job. And I was going to be teaching school, and I was also going to be caring for my grandfather. So the social time that I had was often kind of interrupted or disrupted during the week. And so really I was only available a certain amount of time. So when I would go out and stuff, I was really out to be out, right? Like I was living my best life.
I'm out to be out now.
I was out to be out, right? Like I didn't get to enjoy casual nights out. It was like Saturday or nothing, you know, or things like that. And I wouldn't trade that time with him at the end of his life like that. But at the same time, it was kind of interesting to be 21 and out on my own for the first time, and then choosing to live with my grandfather and taking care of him. So I was kind of in personal care for him, but then, and that kind of played into wanting to kind of be free on the weekends and stuff. And so I just remember being out and trying to meet people. So I would always go out in groups like they tell you to do. I never went out solo by myself because I was like, you have to be safe and all of those things. And I just found myself randomly at a spot that was really kind of popular in the area. There was a lot of people there because it obviously wasn't COVID then, but I was out and this person approached me at the bar, and he was very attractive. He was older than me, which has always been a theme for me. Like, I really appreciate the maturity of a person and things like that. And so we were talking, and the first thing he opened up with was, "What do you do?" Which is a very normative part of conversation. And so I told him that I am a teacher for children that have behavioral disorders, which is a very normative part of conversation. And he flashed me a badge of the hospital. He was like, "That's so interesting. I also work in behavioral health, and I am an ABA. I work with, applied behavior analysis, and work down here locally at the hospital, and all of these things." And so automatically we just hit it off because we had a common shared interest. And so he asked me like questions like, "I would love to take you out sometime," things like that. Very normative parts of being picked up on a night out, basically.
Yeah, and let's pause right there, right?
Yeah.
Because it's an interesting thing, and where we're going, I think, is the deception part.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of this is sort of a natural thing that happens that isn't, how do I want to say, to kind of get in the mind of someone that because I've worked, I don't know how many people you've worked with that are perpetrators of domestic violence or deception or this type of thing, Kasie, from the other side of it. But what I experience is that they're really not feeling good about themselves, and they're trying to build themselves up in a way, and they're really just trying to connect, and they get really good at connecting, and they get really good at connecting by sort of making a bunch of shit up, right? And connecting with the person in that moment almost skillfully, but really to meet emotional needs. And does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I honestly believe that hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
And I do believe that for the vast majority of people, that is the truth, that something has gone awry in the person's life to where they have been reprogrammed to feel like they either have to be on the defensive or be somebody that they're not, or try to be this chameleon to be able to get people to kind of like them. And then when they get stressed out, they can't handle it. And so that tension and release cycle that we'll talk about later kind of comes into play at that point. But hurt people hurt people.
Right. Yeah, and they don't realize they're doing what they're doing, I think, a lot of the times, but but it's regular. It's like behavior cycles, and people aren't realizing kind of what's going on with their behavior. It's one of the things we like. It's one of the things I'm so passionate about talking about these topics, whether it's addiction or, anxiety. I mean, it's so much. It's so cool to be a therapist and talk with somebody, and for the first time in their life, kind of begin to understand, like, wow, like this is what's going on, and it might be going on for 47 years, and they don't realize it. So this, I guess, the point, like I said, I wanted to this just happens naturally and organically, but boy, where it goes to the deception is where we run into, big trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, when he asked me, like, "Hey, can I take you out sometime?" I went ahead and revealed to him, like, "Oh, well, I live with my grandfather who is really sick. And so I don't have a lot of availability." And, he was giving me all the right answers. Well, I mean, it's worth it to me if you'll just, if you're able to go out with me like one night a week or something like that. And so I was just smitten with the fact that this person was really understanding of my circumstance. And so he would invite me out, or he would say, "If you can't do like a full night, could we maybe meet up for lunch? Could we do X, Y, and Z?" And I just thought, this is great. Like, he's very flexible. He wants to, adhere to the kind of lifestyle that I'm living right now, which I know is kind of non-conventional for a 21-year-old and things like that. And so we just started talking and communicating over the phone and texting and things like that. And one thing kind of led to another. And pretty soon, I would say that we were beyond just being friends. There were multiple times that He would show up at my job in a very like endearing way and bring me surprises or presents, flowers, things like that. He wanted to meet people that I knew. So he was very public with it. So at no point did I have any red flags about who he was as an individual. And that's when things started to change a little bit. So the first time that he invited me over to his place for dinner, I noticed that there were a lot of artifacts indicative of having a child, which we had not talked about.
Artifacts.
Yeah, there was some like evidence.
Evidence.
There was a
Evidential
child.
artifacts that something's not up.
Right. There were pictures on the fridge of a child and obviously a woman who I was told was the preschool teacher of the child. And there was a child's bedroom at the house and then an adult bedroom. So being that it was really fresh in the relationship, I was like, cool, you have a kid. I understand why maybe people wouldn't be like so forthcoming about a child. Sometimes they feel like an individual wouldn't want to date them. Like there was a lot of things that I started making excuses for.
There we go.
And so I think that that's really where it started. Once I started accepting the excuses for why things were withheld initially, is where I believe this person really felt like he had an in with me. She's going to trust me. She's going to, be understanding of the things that I'm trying to feed to her right now.
Which is different than I can get away with this. She's naive. This is one where I can have control. Like it's a very different thinking process. And I think it's more what you just said rather than what I just said. And some people imagine it the way I said it.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that's the thing is that, my one hang up was like, as soon as I saw anything that was inconsistent, I didn't want to believe it because there were so many other things that were just on point that I thought like, oh, this one inconsistency is not a big deal. So, still having a good time, still hanging out. And then he started telling me things like as things were progressing and we would talk, I would ask him about different things like, how do you spend holidays? And I would tell him how I would do a holiday, like with my family. And he would say, wow. And I would say, well, what does that mean? And things that involve my family or my friends, he would begin to do the process of what's called gaslighting. He basically would try to underpin how I was raised and some of my fundamental beliefs to kind of break it down to make it seem like what my family does or what I do with my friends is just outside the bounds of normal or outside the bounds of what's appropriate. So the fact that I wasn't flexible about like Christmas Eve, because I've spent Christmas Eve with my family for the last, 22 years and never have spent a Christmas Eve away from my family.
Right.
Things like that, which would be normative to a lot of people about, family traditions, it became like, wow, I've never met someone that's so inflexible. And adjectives that weren't necessarily demeaning initially had a different connotation in the context that he was using them to try to manipulate me psychologically into kind of questioning my own beliefs.
Right. And that's exactly what gaslight. I don't know when the term kind of honestly came around. It seems like it's a new term in our vernacular. Maybe we've gotten more sophisticated at understanding dysfunctional relationships on this level, but almost forcing people to question things about their thoughts and their memories and events and things. I mean, a simple thing is like, no, you didn't put those car keys here. You actually put them over there. You just, you can almost do gaslighting as jokes and being silly with people. But when you start, undermining the entire core, if you will, of what a person stands for and what they really think and their passions and beliefs, and I don't even know if it's intentional, but you systematically start taking that person's mind apart. Yeah. And it's so destructive.
Yeah. And he would do things that he would refer to as pranking, right? Like he made up a fictitious email address and would send me emails from this fictitious email address to quote unquote prank me, to where I would get upset because it would be from like another girl telling me about him to see if I would get jealous or upset. And he would make up these email handles to send me these emails, which again is another red flag. But the way he posed it was, you know, like, oh, you've got to, you know, grow a thicker skin, you know, like your feelings get hurt a lot. You're kind of sensitive, to the point to where I was being broken down emotionally, but not able to see it because I was just in this fog of what the relationship was. And, you know, like it was a joke. Come on, don't be so like sensitive about it. And so I would think like, well, he's right. Like I am really sensitive about it. And maybe this is what happens sometimes, you know, when people haven't had a trusting childhood or they've had things go wrong in their life. Maybe they don't trust people. And so we'll have a conversation about trusting each other. And so we would, and then he would apologize and everything would be fine for a long period of time, for months on end. Like he would
Months
apologize
on end, yeah.
and things would go back. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah, for months on end. I just repeated what you said. I mean, you know, so ultimately, I'm curious, Kasie, how long, you know, like from the beginning of this thing to the end of this thing, were you in relationship?
Yeah. So in a relationship for probably about a year and 2 months.
Okay, so a short time. You know, didn't get married, didn't
No.
have kids. You know, this was kind of more of a dating deal, right?
Yeah, we were just dating, but it got intense really fast.
Yeah.
So like month 3, he told me first that he loved me in the 3rd month. And I knew then that his feelings were advancing far, far earlier than my feelings were advancing.
Yeah.
But I guess I was just like, hey, like, you know, this is my life plan. I want to, you know, have a family one day. I want to be married. So it wasn't until about month 9 that I had, after all of this, like pranking and everything, I had received a very serious phone call. The person called me at work, and the person on the other end was this person's wife. And she had lived, his wife.
Oops.
Yeah. She had lived in that house the whole time that we have been together. The preschool teacher that was in the picture with the daughter is actually her. She works at the hospital with him. She told me at that point that he was actually just like the custodial staff at the hospital, which is not an unnoble profession, but that he had built up the lie that he was a behavioral analysis person at the hospital. The child lives in the home with them. And so what she had been doing was leaving on the weekends mostly, which was very convenient for my schedule, to go down to like see her sister and people out of town. And one weekend she happened to remain there and noticed that he had left his phone at the house. And I obviously called the phone and multiple times. And so she called me back and told me all of this. Well, so the next time I saw him or talked to him, I was basically like, don't talk to me. Like, this is not anything I want to do. I'm not a homewrecker, you know, like all the terms. And he was like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. You have to understand. She's
not
really,
owning
really
it yet?
What'd you say?
So he's not owning it yet.
No. Like you've been to my house. Like, yes, that there's one picture of her on the refrigerator, but did you see anything else of hers? There's no clothes there. You know, you can come over today and look at my house. And I was like, I can't come over today, you know, all the things. But
yeah,
to the point to where I started questioning, like, is he telling the truth or is he not telling the truth? Because at this point, 9 months in, I'm already broken down to the point to where I'm eating anything he's feeding me, you know, like,
wow,
this is
right.
what's happening. Like, this is your reality, you know,
Okay.
this is what you do, you know, your family isn't really right in the head, Kasie. Like, I'm your family now, like your friends. And it didn't happen physically. It's not like he forbade me from going to visit my parents or he wouldn't allow me to go and visit my friends. The isolation was an emotional, psychological isolation from people who I cared the most about in the initial phases of this relationship.
Right.
Breaking down those relationships, telling me the errors of those relationships and my thinking patterns in those relationships. And I remember, sorry, go ahead.
I think it's just striking to me that, you know, honestly, at this point where, you know, it seems clear you're having a real conversation with another real person who's telling you something like, dude, sister, this isn't right. This is not what it looks like, this guy. And yet, but still, like how you can be kind of, I mean, you're very rational.
Mhm.
People that don't know you that are listening, I mean, you got to know, like Kasie is a thoughtful professional person, albeit now aged and matured several years later. But I'm sure at the time, I mean, we're graduated, we're going to teach kids, we're a professional person, like the emotional realities that you could find yourselves in. I don't care if you're 55 or 15, the emotions that you have rolling around in our heads can be so deceiving as much as anything else that he said was deceiving. The way we're feeling and needing to manage our emotions, it's just powerful to me that this lady's telling you something and it's still not breaking through into your head.
Right. Because to me, basically at that point where I was emotionally and mentally in this relationship, it was like everything else is a lie. What he is telling me is the truth because he is trying to protect me, protect my feelings. It's out of love. Like, this is what all the things are happening. And so I remember distinctly going to his house one night and saying, this is making me feel crazy. And he said, like, things happen to people. Have you ever considered going and talking to a doctor about, you may have depression or you may have anxiety that, and that's not something that I can help you manage. Somebody else needs to help you manage that. So basically blaming me for my emotional disparities or distraughtness within the relationship, blaming me for this,
Yeah,
even though you have a
meanwhile,
wife
know
telling
that
me.
my wife currently called you and told you broke this all down, and I'm busted. I'm nailed. Holy cow! No, it's still you're the one that has trouble.
Yeah, to the point to where I left that night
Jeez.
thinking like, am I crazy? Like, am
Yeah.
I irrational? Is this irrational? And so I remember thinking about like calling my best friend and talking with her about it. And so I did. I called her, I talked with her. She's like, "Where are you? I'm coming to get you. Like, this is ridiculous. Like,
Mm.
you're not irrational. Like, you're not crazy. This is just intense and insane." And
Wow.
so the next day, I told him, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I cannot do this anymore. I'm like breaking up with you. And I felt very secure because at that time I lived with my grandfather still. I was about to move out, but I hadn't moved out yet. So I felt very good about doing that. And so we broke up. Well, that was probably like month 10 or month 11 into it. And at that point, there had been no like, physical violence whatsoever. Well, I decided to go ahead and move out into an apartment. Everything was going well. Some friends from the apartment that I'd met out at the pool said, "Hey, we're going to this like, bar and grill down the street. It's basically within walking distance. Do you want to come?" So I went with them to this like bar and grill. Well, he was there, but I did not associate with him. He was actually with somebody else, which I thought was really strange, but whatever. He was with somebody else there, another female. And so I saw him there and I went with the friends to another table and we were all talking. Well, because we all lived at the same apartment complex, we walked there together. So me and like a guy that lived there ended up walking back together just down the same path. It was very innocent. We weren't leaving the bar together. We were just walking together. So we went back. I went into my respective apartment. He went to his respective apartment. I was at my apartment. And that's when the first time I had ever been like probably terrified in my life because my car had a very distinct magnet on the side, on the gas cap side of the car. I assumed that he recognized my car after, following us back and in his car. And he broke into my apartment and got in my
Mm.
face and like held me down. And that's when the first issue of physical violence had occurred.
Wow.
And while it was happening, he was telling me all the things about how much he had loved me and how he couldn't believe, like, he's just so passionate about me. And I would do this to him and leave the bar with another person and all of these things. And
Mm.
so that's when my like fight or fight like just went off and I froze and I remember freezing and that was my response. I did not fight back. I did not try to run away in that instance. I froze. And he said, "You will be with me." And I said, "Okay." And that night we quote unquote got back together, even though I was terrified.
Wow.
Because what I now realize through like studying all this stuff from a therapy's perspective is
Right.
that, tend and befriend is another survival response. And like the oxytocin in the brain simulates to a person sometimes you are safer being with this person in the moment than being without them. And in order to protect yourself, you will remain instead of knowing rationally this is not a good situation for you. And so I remained. And I remained until the second time that it happened, because I had gone to his house, and
Well,
as soon as I
before you go to the second
sorry, go ahead.
time, yeah, before you go to the second time, and that's where, yeah, I think where we're getting to. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take a quick mid-time break here, a little bit after mid-time, and finish up like to the point of getting out. And then part of what we want to cover is what do you do to kind of identify
Yeah,
this and get out of this
yeah,
whole deal. So let's take a pause real quick and we'll be right back.
sure.
Mr. Neal, do you know who BetterHelp folks are? Can you give us a good brief of what BetterHelp.com is?
Well, first, BetterHelp is our sponsor, and what they do is they connect you with a licensed therapist that you can do remote sessions with, whether it's through telephone or now with technology through video sessions, and they help you when you can't go see a therapist or if you need to talk to someone. And as I said, we are now sponsored by them. You go to our website, you click on the counseling button, and you go through this great survey that really matches you with the professional that you need for your situation, whether it's marriage, addiction, anything like that. They basically cover anything you would need. And they're a great organization. And Chris, like you said earlier in this thing, the ability that you can now do with technology and with even going back to just telephone, it's so amazing how they can help so many people now. You're not always, you go past the stigma of having to go to an office now. You're really reaching a lot more people. So BetterHelp, great organization. We are now sponsored by them. That's who they are.
Pretty impressive. I tell you what, if you could do something about the Zoom voice that did that, that is an excellent description. And I definitely put my name behind betterhelp.com. Go to our website, hit the counseling button. It helps our show stay free for those for everyone. Let's get back to the show. So yeah, getting back, Kasie, where we get to, that was the first time until you were there to get into the second time of what happened. I mean, relationships turn. And so that's why we said a close examination of how you can be deceived in dating. This process that people go through that seems so mysterious really isn't that mysterious. It's just a process that starts small and grows and gets to kind of a dangerous level. And I'm tripping that you're going to have another event the second time, but and I want to hear what that is. But you're looking at abusive realities with gaslighting that you mentioned, and isolation is what we talked about intently on the show before. Generally, like, dude, audience, if you hear a theme, isolation generally is not good. We want to reach out and be with people that we trust. We don't want to internalize things, but controlling of resources, acting out, or punishments. And you had this honeymoon phase thing, you get a calm period of time, as you said, Kasie, for months, you have increased love and kindness that sounds like, wow, this guy's okay. He had a rough time a few months ago, but now he's great. He's a nice guy. But then you get back into the tension cycle and it just goes, protection, back to the beginning of protecting for love, overprotection. It's like, it's an insidious, I think oftentimes unintended process that just sort of weaves its way into the way that people operate, right?
Yeah, most definitely. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, the cycle started over. So, there was that whole buildup of tension, which happened, if you remember, like over the course of about 10 months, that tension build with the gaslighting, the isolation, the control. And then we got to the acting out point. And I think once the person that's on the receiving end becomes afraid, because that would be an adjective that I would have used to describe myself.
You said
Almost
terrified.
paranoid. Yeah. Yeah. Almost paranoid, where I'm like constantly looking over my shoulder. That fear response is heightened on all levels. And you're really functioning from that survival part. Like, how am I going to survive this? But you've isolated yourself so much, and you've, really alienated yourself from your friends. I made my family angry in a lot of ways. And so when you make your family angry, your brain at that time is not thinking those are the people that you go to, because you feel like they're disappointed in you. And so you're really completely isolated except for the person that you're kind of with. And so I remember, there for a while, there was that honeymoon phase again after the first violent incident. And there was an extreme calm for about 3 months, and everything was going well. His wife they really were separated at the time and things like that. So I was like, okay, like we're getting back into kind of this loving phase. It won't happen again. But then the cycle started over. And when we would talk about the incident, or if I would bring it up, it would be, if you never would have left the bar with that guy, that never would have happened. And so basically blaming me again for, I just love you so much. The love is so intense that, I just got so passionate and violent. And even in that, when he's trying to take somewhat of an ownership perspective, it's still putting on me. Like, if you weren't so lovable, if you weren't such a good person for me, if you weren't, so perfect for me, and I wanted this so badly, this never would have happened. If I didn't like you so much, this never would have happened. And so I think I didn't recognize the restart of the cycle, but that's exactly what happened. So after about 3 months, there were some immediate red flags that started to pop up again. And one of those was I would not tell him where I was going, like normative places like the store, like Walmart, something like that. And he would be there. And not only would he be there, but he would park his car right beside my car. And I would think, I really find it funny that you're going to be at the same exact store that I'm at the same exact time. So it really started to wear on me to think like he's following me, and I didn't know if that was my paranoid brain or if that was real life. And when that happened, I remember telling my friend at the time, she was the front desk person at the gym that I worked out at. And I said, this is something that's very wrong. And she was like, we've got to do something about it. So she went with me to when I decided to end it with him. This is over. I am done. This is over.
And this was the successful ending?
This was a successful ending until he kicked down my door and broke into my apartment the second time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the violent behavior happened. I immediately called the police. I had a safety plan at that point, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But at that point, I still didn't feel like I could go immediately home to my mom. But there was a person at the school that I was working at that was very kind. And she was actually my teacher at one point. And so I went to her and I told her, I said, I need help. I need to get out of a relationship. I'm having a hard time reconnecting this with my parents and I need your help. And she called my mom for me. And here I was, 22 and a half years old, ready to take on the world, and literally on the floor of a school building, a broken person, because in my mind, I thought it could never happen to me.
And it's so, yeah. I mean, again, the one of the driving things I'm kind of thinking tonight, is where I wrote down at the end of my show notes, and I was just thinking about the stuff, I mean, I want to blow up the myth, it just can't happen to me, is what you're thinking. And I mean, that was going to be the end of the show, but let's pepper it in throughout the middle and the beginning and the end, because you know what? Yes, it really it can, and it does. And that's a big myth in the dating process. You want to really pay attention to how dating is going, and what kind of thing, if you're not feeling right, like listen to your gut here, and I guess we're transitioning to, what do we tell people? How do we get out into the other side of this?
Yeah, I think part of that is, if things feel too good to be true, you really need to inspect that feeling. Because I think that, oftentimes what happens is we get fed things that we want to hear. And you want to make sure that people are being their authentic selves. And so, just listening to your gut is a really good place to start. I also think it's not our job to hang in there. So I think immediately when you start getting the inkling or the feeling or the gut reaction, something about this is not okay, something about this is not right. If you have people that you love and trust in your life saying, this is not good for you, there's probably some truth to that. The majority of people that love and respect you are not vindictive and are not looking to get you to break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend. They're looking for you to be in a steady, like long-lasting, loving relationship. And if they are not seeing that with your partner,
Pay attention.
pay attention. There's
Right. Trust who you trust.
Yes.
Yeah, trust who you trust. Yeah, I tell you, I want to get back to this in a little bit, and I got a little kind of a surprise thing that I want to do in this part of the show. Actually, I need to give her a call. I think she's probably on standby. But how do I want to say, it's got to be interesting to hear, you go through this. Hey, MJ, I'm going to be with you in just a second. So as you go through this, what's it like, honestly, to be like a therapist and, like you're watching this, right? I mean, people are probably like, okay, you're a therapist and you're dealing with people with the same issue. Like, is it cool to help people through and to identify this? Like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an amazing experience because I think I am a living example of post-traumatic growth in that way. And so I think for me, it makes what I do so viable and so real and so tangible that there can be spots of darkness, there can be narrow places, but that people are able to rise above and go beyond the narrow places and experience that post-traumatic growth. And that's honestly one of the experiential reasons that I got into this line of work, was really just thinking through, like, how do we even, get at the core of the individual to be able to improve their functioning in a way that's meaningful to their life.
Yeah. I love the phrase post-traumatic growth. To be honest with you, Kasie, I haven't really heard that phrase before. That's kind of a really cool one. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is going to work out. I was doing just a kind of a creative process audience in my brain when I am getting ready to do shows. I'll kind of, sit back and really think about it and, kind of get prepared. And I thought, you know what? I wonder how Miss MJ Vess is doing. So I just kind of tried to pop her onto my phone and called her at lunch when I was meditating on this stuff and thinking. And MJ, can you hear me, ma'am?
I sure can. Hi, Chris.
All right. I'm doing really good. Can you guys hear MJ, Kasie?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I wasn't sure how this technology was going to work because we didn't zoom her in and I just got her on my speakerphone. So I just popped the numbers over there to Miss MJ Vess because we are talking about, domestic violence, right, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Kasie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Sorry, I accidentally muted myself because I'm real good at computers.
That's funny. Listening audience, my gosh, MJ, when did we do that show? That was so early on in Metrolina's history. I feel like
it was actually very early on in Victory Lifehouse's history too. I think I just had created my first website that July.
That is awesome.
It was like September, October timeframe in 2018.
18. So we have followed each other through the couple of years. So listening audience, this is MJ Vess, the legendary MJ in the Metrolina family, or in the Through a Therapist Oz family. She shared her story much like you, Kasie. We just are talking about what she's been through, MJ. And I wanted to pull her in, Kasie, to kind of talk about, have you ever heard, Kasie, Victory Lifehouse?
Yeah, I have actually, through some of our work with like Monarch on the mental health side to make a referral source to
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So MJ, yeah, she's out there, and then Kasie's out here doing the therapy and, working with people on an outpatient basis, and you're doing, MJ, the Victory Lifehouse project. And I wanted to just give another boost to that because our conversation tonight is switching over to how do we do, what's the exit strategy when women are in this crazy situation, right? Like, yeah.
So we're trying to, Victory Lifehouse is trying to answer their now what question. But normally what I'm looking at is the after they've been able to get out of their situation, more of a resource for the survivor around the nation and after the impact of the trauma. I suppose you say we're offering life education resources. So what we ended up doing was developed a platform that launched last month, where survivors can actually meet the professionals they need in the fields of mental health, financial health, spiritual health, physical health, legal, and the business world, everything I needed when I left. And I had no idea where to turn. Like, I didn't even know how to speak anymore. I couldn't communicate. I felt like I didn't know how to do anything because I hadn't worked in 6 years. So being a secretary was like no longer being a secretary. Now there's this thing called a virtual assistant. So I felt way like the world had just passed me by. So what I did was I developed this program where all these professionals around the nation can meet with survivors around the nation. And it's after they've left. So the really cool thing is people like you, Chris, people who are teaching, they can go on my website and offer their services at a reduced rate just for Victory Lifehouse. And that is so way cool that this has happened since I started, all of this.
Yeah, I know we've talked over the last couple of years, and we've been honored to follow with you and partner with you a little bit and stuff. Kasie, I mean, that's what I was asking you the question, of being able to be a therapist and help people with this. I mean, dude, I'm just sitting here talking to you two, and I just gotta say, listen to the audience, guys, these are two amazing women, powerful, strong, well put together women that are dealing with this. And if anybody's listening to this show with a dating experience where you've got thoughts and questions and doubts, and you find yourself on the floor, Kasie, like you just kind of said, in a schoolhouse, like, dudettes, ladies, listen, these guys have made it and are doing it, and so can you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump on a soapbox there, but I wanted to put that out there.
No, we're living proof. There is life after abuse, and I don't believe that we have to live with abuse. We don't have to accept that in our lives. And I really want to encourage people to choose life.
Yeah. And something else I would say too is that if you are out there listening in the listening audience and you need an exit strategy and don't have one, if you go to loveisrespect.org, you can actually formulate a safety plan, and you can opt into non-traceable websites and things like that. So if that's an issue for you, then if you go to loveisrespect.org, it walks you through how to do it and to erase it from like the internet history and stuff. So it can't be followed up on, but you can create a safety plan and interact with organizations in your area local to you that can help you get out of your situation.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we're going to wrap up with you, Kasie, here as with the show here for a little bit. MJ, is there anything else that you kind of want to put out there? How would they find you? How would they find Victory Lifehouse, all that?
It's victorylifehouse.org. My phone number, email, everything is on there. We are located in the Charlotte, Mecklenburg area of North Carolina, but we are going nationwide. So I encourage entrepreneurs to stop by, check us out, and also survivors to see what the entrepreneurs are offering as far as our classes go.
I like the sound of nationwide, Miss MJ Vest. You're an amazing lady. Thank you for being spur of the moment and on the spot to help us out tonight.
You're welcome, Chris. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Nice meeting you.
Thanks, MJ. Thank you.
You rock, man.
Thanks. Bye.
So yeah, getting back to that, the exit strategy, one of the things I think is cool, Kasie, that you were talking about when we were talking about, what do you do to get out of this? I mean, how do you manage these feelings and these emotions? And, one of the things you kind of said that I think is important, people really actually take on responsibility for, this dating relationship or this marriage that they're in. I mean, there might even be a marriage with kids, and you feel sort of obligated, right, to hang in there with this guy who, even though he's been violent, you're still in a state of mind that you're going to fight the good fight for this relationship, right?
Yeah. Well, and to like prove it to yourself that, your family's wrong, your friends are wrong, like to hold on to the shreds of pride that you may still have left because you've been broken down so much by the relationship that you feel like you don't have anything left. And so I think that that's a really important concept. And I think another thing that I think is important for the listening audience and beyond is that if you are a friend of somebody that you know is going through something similar, you see the gaslighting, you see the isolation, you see the control dynamics, kind of like the old adage, if you see something, say something and stay after it, even if you feel like it's going to ruin the friendship. I can't tell you how many people I had in my life who didn't say anything because they were cheering for me to have a really good relationship. They are cheering for me when I said, this is somebody that I'm really interested in, and this is somebody I really care about and love and like, and things of that nature. I brought this person around my whole sorority. My whole sorority met this person at homecoming,
Nice.
and not one person said anything to me. And it's not their
Yeah.
fault. But what can happen a lot of times in these situations is we talk about the aggressor and we talk about the victim, but there are witnesses present throughout our lives that also witness this happen to us. And so that's another sector of the population that we have to be cognizant of.
It is. It is. I think we need to do, Neil, let's take a mental note, and probably need to redo the show that we did on moral courage, because it comes up in my brain a lot of times when we're talking about different things that, we as a society or topics that we cover are dealing with. Because, and I want to stay here for a minute, because, when you have a friend, and this happens to guys too. I mean, guys out there, if you got a buddy that's in a situation, Kasie, we were talking about that earlier today, right? Like, dudes have buddies that are like, dude, well, you're all right. You're in this thing. I mean, what's going on? This happens to men kind of as well, for sure. And what I think people need to know is that you don't have to come in here and save the day. Like, those sorority sisters didn't need to come and jerk you by the hair, Kasie, and say, hey, look at this. You're not seeing this, and aggressively speak at it. But I think it just takes a soft, calm voice to say, hey, I wonder about some things. I'm confused about some things. This is what I'm seeing, babe. Like, girl, this is something that I'm concerned about. And I don't want to piss you off, but, I just want you to know, like, this dude seems a little off, man. Because you got to understand, you might be wrong too, right? Like, you as an observer of a relationship might be fearful about things that really aren't there. So this is not so cut and dry in the real world. Like, I want you to have conversations. If you have concerns, then, as you said, speak up, but don't speak up in a way where you know what's up. Speak up in a way where you voice your concerns to this person, because it might be so terrifying a situation that she can't even speak to you. So you want to be a friend. You want to be that soft voice. You want to offer concerns and points of confusion, and say, let's talk whenever you need to talk. And you might not realize that you made an impact for 5 more months, but you're talking 3 or 4 times through that 5 months. It might be that 6th month that this woman's life is saved, right?
Agreed. Yeah. And I think it's important to point out too that inter partner violence and manipulation like this doesn't happen just in romantic relationships. It can be in overwhelming friendships. We see it a lot in the service for families that kind of live in base living together, where one friend is more attached than the other friend. And so it starts manipulating through those communities as well. It can be unhealthy relationships that are, same-sex relationships and things like that. So it's not just romantic guy-girl relationships. It extends even beyond that. Because, as MJ so eloquently pointed out, abuse is abuse, and no amount of abuse is okay, whether it's emotional, physical, psychological, or sexual. And so, or even dependency, which could be a whole other show, right? So, but I think it's important to know kind of this cycle and what that looks like, and to kind of move forward with that education. Yeah, and really to stay vigilant.
Knowing yourself now, as you seem to very well, I must give another compliment. No, you know what I mean? Knowing yourself, right? Like, it's it's something that shows. And I guess knowing yourself now, when you look back and you think now, in way of hope and getting to where you're at now, like I mean, I'm not going to out your age, but you're not 28. You're not in your 20s, maybe. It's been a
Thanks.
minute. It's been a minute. I don't like age jokes anymore because they hurt my heart. But listen, I got both of y'all beat by a lot, so don't worry about it. But no, it's been a while, right? So, looking back at this when you were that 22, 23-year-old lady to now, like here's the therapy question. What would you say to yourself? What hope would you offer, from this perspective today?
Yeah. I would say forgive yourself. That's what I would say. I think that out of the whole process, I think that starting with the guilt of taking on responsibility, even, for my ailing grandfather, to kind of bring it back full circle, right? Allowing myself that vulnerable time. And I appreciate that time. But I could have said no to that and not put that pressure on me as well. But I wouldn't have forgiven myself in that moment. I could have, done a lot of different things. And so now, through my own therapy experience and becoming a therapist, I really think that the focusing on forgiving the self is vitally important, because we often, when we look at like the aggressor and victim situation, we often look at, trying to move past the incident. But what we don't realize is that a lot of times the victim in the situation has a lot of self-blame. Why didn't I listen to people? Why didn't I listen to my gut? I could have prevented this. I could have done something different, or I could have done something more. And so my message to myself would be forgive yourself.
Nice. Yeah, that's powerful. That is really powerful. And I thank you for that, Kasie, and thank you for all that you're doing tonight, to say the least. Like it's a big deal for, and what I believe is, people listening to these stories. It's not just telling stories. It's about telling stories, identifying and breaking through the denial of what we can't see, the blindness of what we can't see that we're in. And, if this helps one person out there kind of see something that needs to be seen, then we've done an amazing thing tonight. Neil, are you here tonight? Where are you here? I'm so sorry. I feel like we've just talked over and hadn't pulled you in, man. Sometimes that's going to happen, I guess. Have we blown your head off, man? What are you thinking and what have you heard? We need to taxi out of here, but it's an amazing story, right?
I think it's crazy. I actually knew Kasie before all this happened. So reconnecting with her, it's surprising because I didn't know. So it's great to see, knowing her personality, seeing her now. It's a great thing to see where she is, talking to her, reminiscing, talking. It's really cool. And through this whole thing, I feel such pain for the victims, but then I also feel slight pain for the abusers, because I know that they have something that they have to work on. When I talk to our kids, I have 2 kids, and one of the things I bring up about, dealing with bullies, they're dealing with something. Kasie, you hit on the head. People who are hurt people, and you see that, and you really just want to take those people that are doing that. It's like, just say, what's going on? What do you do? So when they deflect it to the victims, I think, Kasie, you're right. You need to forgive yourself, because it's not you. You're not the one doing that. It's them. And you have to be okay with moving forward, having the hope. But then it also goes back to, what can you do also for these abusers? Because you might be one victim and then there's another victim. And it's this cycle until they get themselves, and they just leave a trail of these victims over and over again. And so I think having hope when you are the victim, and I don't know, that's what leaves me speechless.
It's funny, Neil. Yeah, and you kind of alluded to, you knew Kasie before this, and you guys hadn't talked for a while. I mean, this is why live stuff is amazing, right? That I didn't plan all this at all, but it is an interesting component, Neil. I mean, you just said you knew Kasie before this, and you guys are from the local area, and now you're kind of reconvening with her now, years later. So I wondered, I mean, being quiet through the show and whatnot, and being one of those people that may have been able to make an impact or whatnot. I mean, I think there's also forgiving ourselves around a person too. Like, there's a lot that goes into this. Does that make sense? I mean, you didn't know, you said, you didn't know.
Yeah. And I think you have that on both sides. You have to forgive yourself because, her sorority friends, they didn't know, they didn't say, they don't realize you have that stigma of, well, what if I'm wrong? I kind of went one direction. She went off to Chapel Hill. I didn't go to college. I'm just a techie guy. I got my cert. So I wouldn't even go into the whole Chapel Hill when I moved down here and you had all these Chapel Hill, and I thought you were a State fan. So I'm kind of confused by that. If I remember, I thought you were a big State fan a long time ago. So that's kind of interesting. But so I didn't really hang out with her. I think we hung out a little bit after high school once or twice. And Chris, she is a great person. I remember her from high school, great friend. I mean, when I knew that she was working with you, I was very excited about it for you and for her. So yeah, you do
awesome.
have to forgive yourself as well. If you know the situation, if you know what's going on, you can only do so much because sometimes the person, has to go through things on their own, and you just have to be there for them. That's the biggest thing.
All right, Kasie, we got to get out of here tonight. I'm gonna introduce you to the high five, the Through a Therapist size high five. But is there anything that you want to say, kind of in conclusion, to kind of pull us up, or anything that you missed that we wanted to say?
No, one, just thanks for having me. I think this is a really important topic. And two, I think if you or anyone you know and care about is going through a similar situation, please reach out and get help. That you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And that number is?
He will have it on the show notes, Mr. Neil Robinson. He's a professional expert, right?
Professional expert. But the number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, as soon as I get through all of this, is 1-800-799-7233. Also 1-800-799-SAFE. You can find that on thehotline.org as well. So I would say, if you don't get help here, get help somewhere. Take care of each other, love one another, be safe and healthy in the coming new year.
All right, here's what's going to happen. I'm gonna let you take us out of here, Neil, and then when you're done taking us out of here, I'm going to give a little bit of a holiday message. But before I do, see, we are doing the distancing, Zooming, but it's funny, it's weird. Like, Kasie's at Metrolina right now. She's in her office. I'm in my office, and we're Zooming. So while Neil's taking us out of here and telling you, about some things, and I'll come back and give a goodbye holiday message. But Kasie, it's courageously strong what you're doing. And so I created a tradition of giving a high five when I'm able to meet with people. And we do a hand clap when we're across the states, on one side of the country to the other. And so this time I'm actually excited I could do a real live high five. And I know it's COVID time. We're going to wash our hands afterwards, but I'm coming to you to give you a high five. And I just think it's really, really cool, what it is that you've done. And I appreciate the courage that it takes to do that. Neil, take us out of here, man, and I'll be right back.
All right. You guys can catch us at throughatherapisteyes.com as they give their high five. As Chris said, we are going to be adding more and more stuff to the website, make it easy for people to use, 100+ episodes on this thing. So much great content, so much information that Chris has provided and Craig and all of his guests. So throughatherapisteyes.com. You can reach us on any podcast platform, iTunes, Spotify, whatever you like to listen on. We also have all those social media platforms between Facebook, LinkedIn, some Instagram. So we're gonna slowly be building those things up even more. So we're there for people that need it. So come find us and get involved. Let us know what you want to hear, what you need, and we'll put it out there.
And with that, 2020 is done. We will be back in 2021. I'm excited to say that, man. I mean, it is the Christmas holiday season. You guys will get this show before Christmas. We want to wish you a Merry Christmas from Through a Therapist's Eyes. Craig Graves, Neil Robinson, and myself, Chris Gazdick, just love doing this show, for you and with you. Because, I'm so passionate about everything with substance abuse and mental health and what I do for my life's work. Stay tuned with us, man, because I think 2021 is going to be a really good year. Certainly going to be better than what we've dealt with. I think we all can agree with that. But I just really appreciate you guys following with us. We've been doing this for, 100+ episodes now. We're staying strong. We want to get stronger with you. And, Happy New Year and Merry Christmas. And my golly, we're going to see you in the next new year of 2021. Thank goodness, right? Take care.